All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Unlock podcast. I'm here with Chad Lingefelt and Lars Johnston, and today we are going to talk about a topic, private equity in the lock and security industry, topic that I think a lot of business owners are curious about, a topic that I think a lot of us don't know much about. Hopefully, some of us know something. Yeah. Could be interesting.
Has it stopped us before?
Yeah, why would that have any relevance?
If nothing else, it's a topic that I think is thrown around in our industry. We have had it asked to us in the past. What do people think the private equity is going to do in the industry? What's the future look like? What do we know? And I think it's just good to get some thoughts out there and have some discussions about it. So
before we do that, Tony, we need to address a major issue right now.
Okay.
Does the barber come into the sauna to cut your hair, or do you have to go outside of the sauna?
That's where I was going with this.
You know, I haven't quite got her to come here yet. But I go to the barber. Exciting topic. I'm going to your barber in a couple weeks, so we'll see.
That is true. Shout out to Riley.
Yeah,
our girl, North Carolina. A couple times a year, we fly to North Carolina to get a haircut.
The infamous Riley. I've heard a lot about her. Can't wait to meet her.
How come they cut the top of your head but not the lower part, like around your neck, where you grow out that neck beard?
Well,
you look very sharp. It's almost like you just took a portrait or something like that.
You look wonderful.
I actually didn't. So funny story. I was supposed to have Graham's 1-year-old pictures yesterday, actually. But Graham's been a little sick. So the photographer was kind enough to acquiesce and move it back a couple weeks. So unfortunately, the hair won't look as fresh, but it's all about Graham, not me. So
yeah, it is all about Graham. That is a fact. And Lars, you have changed your entire studio there. You've got a comfy chair now. You're just kind of chilling out.
Yeah.
Nice and relaxed.
Actually, I'm still...
And I'm glad you got dressed for the podcast.
Tony just used the word acquiesce.
He did.
Like, are we just going to let that slide? He just casually is like, well, they acquiesced. Like,
I feel like I'm listening to a conversation with AFG. I have to have Google open all the time to know what she says.
Kidding. Yes, Chad, you know what? Here is my thought. Mm-hmm. Every week I have to sit here with you two, and it's quite painful. More
glad
so,
the feeling's mutual.
It's physically painful because I've been sitting on a box, literally a wooden box, for 28 episodes or 22. What, Tony? Don't even say it. I don't care what episode number this is. Point is, I have upgraded significantly. I am sitting in a chair now. It has a back. Like I am ready. I am just a fountain of knowledge, ready to be. And I'm comfy. Also, I'm going to give a shout out to my boy Brian here. Zuike. I'm wearing a hoodie. This is my new favorite piece of clothing of all time. Zeuike. Zuike.com. Unbelievable. He sent me some clothing and I put it on, and I've been wearing this for 3 days, guys. This has been 3 straight days. I'm not washing it. I'm not taking it off.
It is not apparent at all that you look like you've been this is the same clothes for 3 days.
Dude, and they're actually moving. It's how this whole thing started. They're moving, so they have a big sale on. So that's probably why he sent it to me, because it was cheaper. But anyway, it's in Canada, so you'll have to Google that. That's actually a country north of you guys.
For now.
Never heard of it.
For now, right.
It is. It's good to see you guys. It's been a while, I feel like, since we have gotten together to record a podcast, but it is nice to hear the dulcet tones of all of our voices, as Mr. Younger has said.
As a leopard purrs.
Yes.
Yeah, so really on nice that note,
Tony, go ahead and get
email. Never mind. Anyways, so we are talking about this today. It's been requested by a couple people, and I think it's an important topic. So what I want to start with is do you
want to explain what private equity is?
Yes.
Can we start with that?
Yes. Why don't you start with that?
Well, that was a great little Uno reverse right there.
What is private equity? Okay.
You define that for us.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a pretty literal term if you're unfamiliar with it, but you could Google what private and what equity is. But, it's it's a good start.
Private
equity
off, guys. We're running great.
Yeah. Hopefully Beeves can just edit out that last 5 minutes. Except Tony's haircut, we'll put that on. Private equity generally represents an investor, or it's represent lots of home offices, which are families that have enough money to buy parts of, generally speaking, private companies, inject equity being money, capital, into the business, buy 100% of it, 50% of it, 30% of it, buy a piece of it. Usually what they're looking to do, unlike venture cap, so I think maybe that's where I'll dive in here. The difference between venture money and private equity money, generally venture cap is they're looking at putting in $1 and making 100. So there's a lot of risk involved. It's usually, kind of that infancy stage where it's an idea. They don't usually have a product. Private equity is more they're looking at, 10 times or 8 times their money, or just growing that investment. So it's much less risky. It's a lot of the time it's in an established business where they think an injection of capital will either improve technology to make them more efficient, to make more money, or geographically expand, which we've talked about. But it's just groups of companies that are looking to invest private dollars into companies for a sizable return, and in that kind of 5-year time frame.
That's a good definition. So, Tony, why are we talking about this?
We are talking about this because we feel that it is a trend in our industry, and there's a lot of conversations about it. And I feel that people want to know about it. We also had a person request topping about it. Yes, we. Yes.
Man of the people, Tone.
I think your definition was pretty good. I think I was talking to someone else about this the other day, and it is interesting when you think about private equity. It is a very self-explanatory term. It is private equity as opposed to public equity, like the stock market, right? That is a major difference. It's not a publicly traded investment. Is a privately traded investment, like you said, venture capital being a form of private equity, but for more risky startup investments. Obviously, I think by definition, if you went and bought Chad's business, that would technically be private equity. It's just not quite a private equity group of buyers, but it still is private equity. But today, we're here to talk about the group of buyers, the companies that their main goal of business is to buy businesses and make money off buying businesses. Yeah. And
it's heating up right now with, I'm certainly not going to go down this path, but with the political environment changing in the US, and we have an upcoming election in Canada here in the next couple months, there's a more capitalist type movement going on right now where, it's just less stringent environment. There's going to be more capital freeing up. Companies are looking to add to their balance sheet because the cost of money is going to be, more affordable than we've seen the last few years. There's a lot of appetite out for it. And I know, Chad, you've had a few conversations or at least phone calls of people inquiring.
Yeah, for sure. Make a side note of this, Tony, for future episodes. We need to interject at the beginning of the episode the things that we're actively reading or listening to right now, because I think that would be a fun thing to share and discuss. On that note, I heard a quip the other day that said one of the major factors to become a capitalist is first you must have capital.
Yes, that's true.
I was like, that's fair. So anyway, I have entertained a lot of conversations around private equity with private equity firms or M&A firms, merger and acquisition groups that are looking to acquire companies. And I want to put an asterisk around that, not because I'm interested in selling to private equity, but because I am interested in what they're doing in our channel. So I think going back to private equity is not a new thing for our industry, but it typically has held itself in the distribution, wholesale, contract hardware space. Yep. And it's probably been tried a few times, maybe before our time, where they've tried to enter into the space on the actual service side. But private equity as a whole right now has a huge focus on trades. And
services.
Services. Yeah. They started down the path with HVAC, plumbers, electricians, all that, and really trying to foundation repair, all those different things. They figured out a model that they could build a platform around, and then they could accelerate it. And so this is another one of those. They started looking at roll-up doors, then the pedestrian doors. Access control is a huge target of theirs. So the conversations that I've had with folks has been one of two conversations. One, they have already developed a platform and they're trying to add to it. And I'll define what a platform is in just a second. But that was the first conversation, is they're looking for a company that meets their criterias to go after and bring them on. Right. The second conversation that I've had is around people that are trying to build a platform. And a platform in the private equity world and M&A side, they are really focused on finding a company that they can create that already has processes, proven processes, a sales strategy, a lack of reliance on the owner doing everything in the business.
Yeah, a strong management team is generally what they talk about. Yeah.
Yep. And then they can go in and acquire that company, then start to acquire other companies and bolt onto that to expand the platform. But they typically want to start with something that already has 75, 80%.
It's easy to scale is what we're describing, right? Something that is scalable, where an injection of money, capital, would just increase revenues without a lot of, headache.
Yep.
Is what I'll say.
That's effectively what they're trying to do. And so the private equity space is looking into the lock and security industry. They're saying, hey, we really want to go after this access control model, but we also need the service side. And so they're looking at the locksmith side as well. And they're still a little unclear from the conversations I've had as to where those differences are and then how they're actually going to activate it and scale it. But that's what they're actively looking at inside of our channel, inside of our industry right now.
What have they mentioned to you? Because I've had these same conversations, but have either you heard, the size that they're looking for?
Yes.
So, yes, we talked to one company, and actually I mainly talked to them because I was interested in, we get calls all the time, as I'm sure you guys do.
Fun conversation for them.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the amount of questions Tony would have?
No, so it was actually, I was not.
What have we stumbled upon here?
We seem to get emails weekly, and I'm sure most people listening to do as well, but I always ignore them and say, we're not interested. Sometimes I'll respond and say we're not interested, but most of the time I ignore them. But one time the guy replied and said, well, would you be interested in a conversation? We run into companies that are smaller than we're looking for, and you might be potentially interested in acquiring them. And so I had a conversation with the guy because we're in acquisition mode, and basically they're specifically looking for companies that are around $10 million or higher, and typically have an EBITDA of, I would say, at least $1 million, if not higher. So ideally higher, but that's definitely their minimum threshold. They have no interest in acquiring a $100,000 company or a $500,000.
There are different segments. Like the family office is, and again, the family office is a version of private equity, but it's generally a large family that has generational wealth. Yeah. And they're looking to diversify the portfolio. So we've talked to some of these more niche companies as well, and 5 million was the number they threw out. But if you're looking at $1 million of EBITDA, that's one thing. But $2 million is something that they can scale, and that's kind of where the excitement lays, or a clear path to that. But the revenue is really only part of the equation.
Yeah, it's just a quick measurable for them because they're looking at what's your profitability. So what Tony just described is spot on, where they're looking at $10 million in revenue with that 10% ish profitability, and that's kind of where that threshold is. So they're gonna ask you a lot of questions to see where you're at, and if you're sub 10 million. If you're sub 10 million and you have a higher than 10% profitability, then you probably are a unicorn that they would continue to ask a lot of questions about. For your point, Lars, that it would be a point of scale, but that's ultimately what they're looking for. And to your point, Tony, I think we're in acquisition mode as well. I think Lars is as well, and that's one of the interesting conversations around that is. They're not looking at the companies that we're looking at to acquire. Right. So there is some cross-pollination because they're doing the hard work to go out there and see who is interested in selling. And then what they're finding, I think, is in our industry, there is not a lot of companies that meet their criteria that are very structured on the locksmith side and just locksmith and access control.
Just traditionally small business in general, you're not going to get that structure that you're looking for because the vast majority of process and structure, standard operating procedures is all in the owner's head.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
So-
I think that's probably why they started with the HVAC industry, the plumbing industry. I think those industries are a little less fragmented, and you end up with larger tickets, larger average ticket sizes, and therefore larger companies, and it's easier for them to instill some capital in and grow it quicker. Where
That's intricate. Ours is very finicky.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
Right.
You talk about the average number of SKUs. I know this was something I talked about, HVAC versus
right.
locksmithing. We average probably sell 12,000 SKUs. Like it's ridiculous.
But you also, if you look at, and this is another really intriguing side of the conversation, when private equity has had success in HVAC and electrical, plumbing, all that, those are commercial and residential stringent, and nobody is. I mean, and that's a definitive, but 99.9% of people, homeowners, are not trying to fix their own HVAC.
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying to fix their electrical, and they're not trying to fix their plumbing.
The perceived complication and challenge of it, yes, is there. Whereas
in locksmithing for your home, there's a lot of stick, out of the box DIY security systems. Yeah. There's a lot of, you go buy a lock off the shelf at a big box store and it's 6 screws and you're done.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot more people that are going to do DIY. So the reason I say all that is when they looked at those markets, they could scale them. They could increase their margins a lot more rapidly because it's not something that people can go outside of trying to find a reliable resource.
Right.
And even more so, when you look at those services, those are services that most people want to work with a recognized brand that they know can be consistent. Maybe they can buy some type of a service agreement or an ongoing service model so that they can feel protected in their home for their HVAC. Because nobody wants to be in the middle of the summer and HVAC. I mean, at least in the South, I don't know about up north, but they don't want to be in the summer without having HVAC. So it's a process that can be replicated. It can be scaled at a more rapid pace. The lock and security model, it's got the ability to scale, but it's got different challenges that they are not going to be able to apply the same principles to.
And and another, I think, main thing we're missing of why our market has been largely left alone is it's a pain. We are a labor-centric, person-centric industry as it stands right now. The other markets where you're selling a lot of product is you sell a furnace, a $5,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 furnace, right? There's a lot of revenue coming from that source, where our world, we're probably 50-50, right? Labor means you need people. People means you need management and overhead and administration. And that's more difficult. So
especially in an industry that's relatively unregulated. And it's not like an accounting industry where you have tax law regulating you, right? In the plumbers, it's very heavily regulated, I think, by plumbers union. We don't have a union. We don't have much regulation from a locksmith standpoint nationwide.
Yeah, exactly. And, and then the other obvious is, if the private equity gets involved and they'll roll up and acquire, and you're going to get, a big package, who then buys it, right? There isn't a definitive company. There isn't a large entity there's no clear exit.
Well,
there are other private equity and there's other options, but there is no definitive player. There is no national large locksmith or security, kind of organization.
So the long-term play for everybody that I've talked to is private in our size space for the channel, right? They are looking at those companies that are $1 to $2 million, $1 to $3 million EBITDA. They're going to build a portfolio of $100 million. And once there's private equity groups that want to come in and maintain a portfolio up to 100 million. Then they will sell that portfolio up to the people that only manage 100 million to 250.
Yep.
They'll grow it to that. Then it's the 3 to 5 year plan. And somebody told me recently, most private equity groups, they come in and say that they want to hold on to it for 3 to 5 years, but the typical term is 5 to 7 years.
7. Yeah.
But that's what they're coming in and doing. They're just trying to hit it to the next point of revenue and EBITDA that they can they take that to market to the next bigger group. Yeah. And then they rinse and repeat.
So that's a pretty good point there. It's different than probably if someone were to sell their business to someone like us, is that the private equity is very much so looking to grow and flip as opposed to grow and like it's not a buy and hold strategy.
It's in most cases,
but that's a
it's a capital appreciation as opposed to a cash flow business.
Right? Correct. But that's the point that they're trying to do is I'm going to put this cash in and then I want to get my return on it and exit and go do it again. That's what the investors do.
Yes, I have a little money. I would like more. That's where you come in.
Yeah, that's where you become a capitalist. I have capital.
I have capital. Without it, you're just a venture. Anyone can be a venture. It's the
concepts
capital,
of an idea,
which is really the key to the venture capital.
Well, you guys have had more conversations with private equity firms than I have. What is your understanding as far as...
You picked this topic, right?
Correct. Yes, because I wanted to ask you questions for our listeners' sake. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. My exposure to private equity, listen to a couple podcasts that talk quite a bit heavily about it, and it's an intriguing topic, but have not taken the time to have any conversations really myself. So
sounds risky.
Yeah, it does. Really risky.
Super risky.
Anyways, what have you understood as far as their preferences as far as ownership stake? Do they typically want a majority? Are they flexible? Do they want 100%? What is their typical buying strategy from your experience?
So my conversation. So I've had probably 4 coffees, sit down for probably an hour and a half with different private equity companies. Unsolicited email crap I ignore. But I actually just last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, I had a coffee with a guy. And, I don't want to say, well, it depends because that's the worst.
You always say that's the worst,
that would
but
be
you say it all the time.
That,
so,
it is. So I'm trying to qualify this a little bit and articulate it. There, as Chad mentioned, there's different buckets that they're looking at. So generally they'll spin up a fund and they'll say, okay, we're going to raise $10 million. We're going to spend the $10 million. We're going to raise that 10 million in equity to 50, right? And then we're going to sell off that package elsewhere. So depending on what, and they'll be openly and honest about their kind of structure and plan, but they will differ a little bit in how they're looking to get there. So, for instance, the guy I was talking to was specifically, they aren't looking for 51%, right? That's kind of everyone's biggest fear on our end. It's like, well, we don't want to give up control, yada, yada, yada. Well, they're not looking to run the company. They're looking to invest in the company. So he was talking about a 30% stake, a 25% stake. I don't think they're going to go probably under 20. 11% is obviously the magic number. I don't know, but in the US, but in Canada it is. They want to, effectively have some input, a seat at the table, a director position, something like that. But it can really range anywhere from, I'd say, probably 20 to 50. But yeah, the main thing is it's not like they want to. It's not like a venture. They're not trying to put in a bunch of money and then come in and put a CEO to run it. It's an investment to grow it. It's basically giving you the capital to grow the business and then sell it. So they don't want to come on and take over. They just want to invest in it and help you grow. Because once, I think a key part here is, if we're a 5 million revenue company, okay, you're going to get a multiplier of maybe 2-3x somewhere in there. Okay, I'm just generalizing here. But at a $10 million revenue, you're going to see that multiplier go up. At 20, it goes up as well because there's just more to it. So what they're looking at is taking a smaller revenue, making it higher by investing in it, knowing that the multiplier is going to be higher with higher revenue.
And why does that multiplier go up?
If you've gotten to that scale of a business, then the processes are in place The professional management is in place. You are at the ability where small tweaks can gain big outcomes. Okay. When you're under a smaller size, there's still if you haven't quite crept over $5 million in revenue, you're still missing a lot of processes for scale, and they don't want to do that. They don't. Can I figure out how to optimize this on a spreadsheet and make more money? And if it works, then great. But coming in and putting in operational processes is not what they're coming in for.
If you're to, come in, inject some capital, improve the business by 10%. Of 20 million, that's substantial.
Yeah.
Of 2 million, who cares? Right.
Sure.
So it's just, and then, generally speaking, you would find a $20 million company will be more ingrained.
Fine-tuned.
It's harder to screw up.
Yeah.
It's going to be a more substantial presence. That'd be my understanding.
That's interesting. In some of the podcasts I've listened to, they've said that typically private equity is looking for at least 51%. So it's interesting to hear that that's not always the case.
So what I've heard and the conversations that I've had with folks is they're looking for 100%, and they may offer you a mix of cash and to roll some equity into a larger group because they're trying to hold on to some key leadership, but they're looking to acquire it so that they can roll it. And they may, like to Lars' point, they may buy a smaller percent with the expectation that it's just getting a foothold in because they're going to get more down the line. But yeah, they want a control. All of the groups I've talked to, they want a controlling stake in the company because they are going to make those decisions and they're going to push the company forward.
And I bet you that will be directly related to the size of the fund.
Yeah.
Like the guys I'm talking to, probably have, I'm going to say 50 to 100 million worth of asset, and I'm guessing the groups you're talking to are quite a bit larger than that want a controlling, want to put in a CEO, want to put in, and the guys that I'm looking at, they're like, hey, if we give you, $5 million right now, could you, double the business through acquisition, through however? And if the answer is yes, okay, we're in, and then we'll help you either buy it back or help you sell more, or we'll sell it, or whatever. So
unfortunately, my takeaway is that you were right. It does really depend. Depending on the type of fund, it's really going to.
I said.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Exactly what you said. But that is a good takeaway. Like some companies are looking for a majority stake. Some companies are looking for 100%. Some are looking for a minority, and it all depends on who you're talking to and what their goals are.
For sure, and also what your goals are within your exit, because there's a large, I think we sit in a group of minorities in our industry because we're all in our 40s or Tony in his late 20s. What?
I'm just looking at Lars' face, and
that just means something different in our world. Sitting in a group of minorities,
you follow what I'm saying. Majority of the ownership of lock and security businesses are well into their retirement age.
Gotcha.
There are not a lot of young owners.
Yeah.
That's what
I
was
just
referring
laughing
to.
At Lars's face, and
that's a typical easy thing to laugh at.
I know.
Wow. By the way, so we can edit that out. I hope you're listening, because that was just hurtful.
Lars, your lighting is significantly better today.
The new chair, it's built-in LEDs.
You don't have the shadow under.
The shadow is not there anymore, which is great. Anyway, so going back to. So we're at a different point where what does our exit look like? It's funny maybe this is a funny story, but I had literally yesterday, 24 hours ago from right this point where we are recording this, one of our team members, I was walking through the warehouse and he said, Hey, Chad, does anybody ever approach you? I'm sorry.
You went to work yesterday. Good for you.
I was.
Sorry, keep going.
It's. He said, does anybody ever approach you about buying LockDoc? And I knew we had this episode coming up today, and I was I kind of chuckled a little bit. And so we started down this conversation, and I was explaining to him kind of some of the options that are out there, and also some of my philosophy on that and what I see as the future of our company. So it was eye opening that an employee asked about it. Like, so there's a lot of.
Sorry, do you know where that was coming from? Why he asked the question?
Yes, I do. He said so. Internally, he received an email. He's works in the warehouse, but he received an email from somebody that said, "Hey, I see that you're an owner in LockDoc. Was interested to see if you were interested in selling." And he was like, I'm not an owner, but also, sure, I'll sell.
Yeah. Send me the check, baby.
But so, yeah, it was prompted because somebody had reached out. He had gotten a solicitation email from somebody. So the conversation is out there. So it may be something, just maybe as a word of advice to those that are listening. If you're getting approached, then probably people inside your organization might be getting approached as well. And it may be something to state. I remember seeing a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago now, there's another company in our industry, and they had made a big deal and posted on LinkedIn that said, "We are not for sale." We get approached by private equity all the time, and this, this big thing, "We're not for sale. We're locally owned, blah, blah, blah." And so they basically tried to take it and spin it into this, I guess, a marketing endeavor to show that they were locally owned and operated, and that they weren't interested in it. So, but at the same point, I think the reason I brought all of those stories up was it's a conversation that's happening. You should, whatever your philosophy is on it, you should make your company aware of it one way or another, because it would, I think, bode great benefits.
So, on a similar topic, I think a lot of people listening to us are in a position where they potentially might be looking to sell their business in a certain period of time. If I was looking to sell my business, whether it be to Chad, whether it be to private equity, whether it be to someone in your local area, there's a pretty much of a standard of what people are looking for when they're buying businesses. What are the main things a business owner could do if they were looking to sell their business to optimize it and set it up for success?
Basically, just kill the thing, let it die, is really the best.
Drive it right into the ground.
Yeah, drive right there, and then ask for a high multiple. I think that's what I would advise.
That's the key. Yeah, like a Delta flight, you just go in there and invert it, flip it. Yeah.
But you do see that from time to time. Actually, some people they
wait too long.
Yes,
that was that was terrible sarcasm on my end. Just for clarity. That's the unfortunate part. I was talking to somebody earlier today about that peak.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have this period of time where you're hustling and trying to grow a business. You finally start to see some success. You get this peak, and then you start to ride the mountain down on the other side.
You get tired.
And at the lowest point is when you go, "Oh, I'm ready to sell." And it is the lowest value for the company. Processes are the worst. Profitability is the worst, and you're ready to exit because you're tired of dealing with all the headaches. So that's not. If I'm looking at the business, I'd love to see it at that, as it's scaling up, because then you can take something and continue to go with it. You definitely don't want you can turn things around, but it's a lot harder to turn it around once it's already on the decline.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Well, I was going to say, here are a few things that I've heard, and I would agree with them. So this was some of the conversations I've had with private equity around what are the things that they are looking for that make a company appealing to them. One, they're looking for EBITDA. They want to know what EBITDA is, and it needs to be at a certain point. That's just life.
They want profit.
If they talk to you and you don't know what it is, that is a clear indicator that they will probably pass on you.
You think they value that more than cash flow?
It's a number one question that they're going to ask.
Okay. And why more than cash? Why do they care?
Because they want to know how profitable the company is.
I was going to say, I believe it's probably because they're the ones injecting cash, so they know if it's profitable, they can grow that cash and sell it further.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think it's just EBITDA is an easier number to comprehend. I think when it comes down to it, cash flow is what they're actually going to look at, what matters, because that's what drives value. Unless that's it, unless that is their direction. But I don't think you're going to find that with private equity as much.
Well, I would say that it's the introductory conversation. They're trying to get past a certain point. If they see EBITDA as a certain value or percentage below what they're looking at, then they're going to drive the conversation differently.
And it's a concrete number.
Yeah, it is.
Like,
yeah.
What's your cash flow? I don't know. That's a lot harder, but what's your EBITDA? Well, it's the range.
Why EBITDA and not net profit?
I don't know. If you listen to Charlie Munger, he's going to tell you.
answer that a lot better.
Yeah, well, he's going to tell you EBITDA's the biggest piece of crap out there. But the idea is, EBITDA is a better. This is the theory, but EBITDA is a better indicator of the operating profitability of a company, as opposed
if you're
to
depreciating foo-foo assets. It doesn't really show you what you're operating. Like in theory, if you're buying that with capital, it's what, like you said, it's what the day-to-day operations is producing in capital each year. As opposed
Charlie
to
Munger would tell you that depreciation should be included because that's cash you've spent buying an asset.
It's
and the bookkeeping crap just gets in the way.
Right.
So that's net income. I mean, it's going to be a little business dependent looking at it, but really what they're trying to figure out is, does this thing make money?
Right.
And the easiest, most concrete, obvious thing, also taking out the tax implications, does give you a little bit of a clearer,
normalizes it a bit better.
Yeah. It gives you an apples to apples kind of look.
The other thing that they're looking at is the makeup of your customers. So are you doing a lot of work for national service providers? What is your percentage of residential? What is your percentage of work with property managers? What is your percentage of work with new construction?
Yeah, repeatable business.
Yeah.
Yep. What is your percentage of work with commercial property managers? Those are questions that they're going to ask. Now,
how many people can answer those, do you think, in our industry?
Everybody's going to tell you what they think that it is. Not many can tell you with a high level of accuracy, but here's what they're going to say is, or what they're specifically looking for. Because I asked the questions, I answered the question, and then I asked, why does that matter? They do not want you to be married to new construction because it is a volatile market. So you may have high peaks and low valleys.
That's do not more the contract hardware world. Yeah.
Yep. They do not want to see you doing work for a lot of national service providers. So if a majority of your work is tied up in, or a large percentage of your work is tied up, 20% is tied up with national service providers or as a subcontractor, that again is a volatile market, and you don't own the relationship with the end user.
Right. So there's more risk, and therefore it's less valued.
Yep.
Okay. Makes sense.
They really are they're asking questions to see how close you are with the actual end user. If you're a subcontractor between all of those layers, then you are replaceable, easily replaceable. So they're looking for the partnerships in the relationship.
The closer to the relationship. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. It drives more value. It is, that is a bit surprising, that, the national, because, one of the things our industry is guilty for is we're better at wide than deep. We leave a lot on the table with our individual customers and chase after more rather than doing more for our existing customers. So, it's just that's interesting to me that national providers would be, less valued than local, but the relationship part makes sense. So it's, like when I'm looking at a business, one of the first things I'm looking at is, I don't want to say the number of customers, but, who are the biggest customers, and I don't need their names, but I want to know kind of what percentage of revenue they are.
Right.
Because that gives you an indication of market presence.
When are you getting value out of that, or is it just a bunch of single-use customers that are you're not really buying a customer if they're not going to return back?
Your cash customers. If it's 60% cash customers, you've got a good market presence, meaning your marketing's working or something is working, but it's harder to scale.
Right.
Yeah, and it's
harder to go deep.
And also, if you have one client that is a larger than 10%, a double-digit portion of your revenue, if that leaves. If that doesn't come over during the acquisition, then that is also a challenge on the business as a whole.
Yeah. I was going to say, on the flip side, for our sake, finding a customer that is a large whale that's, for lack of a better term, tied into you with a key system and they can't leave is actually a valuable thing and a very small business for us to look at. Like,
it's a cost prohibitive thing to change.
Right.
There's a big barrier to move. Yeah.
It's all the more reason to buy a smaller company if they have one customer that can bring you $50,000 in revenue. That they have and you're basically buying the key system essentially. That's valuable.
I can speak to it. So Canada, we have 2 telecom companies. Yes, we have 2. One of them we're the national service provider for in our acquisition up north. Over half of its revenue is that one telecom provider. Now, it's consistent. It's it's a good revenue stream. But to me, when I looked at that, it was sexy. It was like, oh, there's a lot of revenue there. But it instantly, there's way more risk to me.
Yes.
Because one customer is half your income statement.
Something that goes south and now that,
And then what happened was they acquired another company. Now this one's big enough. I don't think it's even possible that they could get acquired. But, if they got acquired and they have an incumbent service provider, we gone.
Yeah.
Or they have an in-house, right?
Sure.
So that was something that we had looked at, but.
So that is a big thing that they're looking at. They're also asking if you have a go-to-market strategy, if you have a sales team, an active sales funnel versus it reliant upon the owner. If the owner is the salesperson, then that is a red flag for them that they're going to be cautious of. And then documented processes. How many of the processes do you have that are documented or repeatable? And then effectively, what is the owner's involvement in the day-to-day operations? Those are some of the big questions that they're looking for. Too much involvement is a concern for them because at point of displacement, how do you refill it, especially if those processes are not documented? Again, going back to what we said kind of up at the top of the program, is those are going to be inherent to a certain size of a business. So you're not going, it's going to be difficult. I guess I'd say that it's going to be difficult for a locksmith and security business to get over a certain $7-8 million in revenue without refined, defined processes.
Yeah. And the more I'm thinking about this, there's from a conversation and just from acquisition history of my own, I'm going to use the term cash flow here again, but not in the sense of, EBITDA versus cash flow. A general rule of thumb, if you're preparing for sale or you're wanting to attract, an end game of some sort, 3 years is probably the magic number that you're looking at. People will look at generally your financial statements for 3 years. So if you're within, 3 years of when you're trying to get out, that's probably when you want to start tightening things up here a little bit. The other thing that is always going to be an impact is your balance sheet, your inventory. I can tell you right now, no one wants your inventory.
Oh,
no one. So I got $500,000 of inventory on the books. Perfect. I'll give you $100,000 for it.
Yeah.
If not, I don't want it.
Yeah.
So
your inventory is not as valuable as what you think it is.
Looking at the assets is like a big, a misconception on the sales side, thinking, okay, now vans and vehicles and, key machines and those things. Okay. Those are going to be assets that are going to provide value, but your inventory, which is probably the biggest asset. Well, it is the biggest asset on your balance sheet. I'll tell you right now, it's virtually worthless. Whatever you think it's worth, cut it in half and then reduce it another 20%. Right. So these are the things though that, before you sell, you want to reduce that inventory as much as you can because it is going to be worth way more sold to the public than it is to whoever the buyer is, because we're not going to give you crap for it.
And I would also add to that, if you don't have good records on your inventory, like you just have a pile of stuff in the back on shelves, that's even you're talking 20 cents on the dollar, probably even less than that. If I've got to go in there and actually pay somebody to inventory it.
One of my favorite stories was, and I might have even talked about this on a previous episode, but it's during an acquisition, this person wanted, $20,000 for this. And I said, I want zero for it. Well, it's going to cost me to get rid of it. So, I know, me too.
Yeah.
So it's actually worth minus $500.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I can't tell you how much money I've paid to get rid of inventory that I've
Yeah.
purchased before. How many thousands of dollars I've paid in dumpster fees to get rid of it because,
dude, us too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
on something we just bought.
Exactly. Let me just buy this and throw it in the trash.
Spent $5,000 buying it and then spent $2,000 throwing it out.
Yeah, so I would 100% agree with most everything Lars said there. Like, get your financials in order, and if you're looking to sell, then you've got a 3-year runway to start really getting that in order. Because, again, depending on the size of the business and the ones especially that we are looking at, you're really focused on operational efficiency and kind of what that net profit is. And the better you can make that, that's really your direct increase to a multiple because, and this probably, that's probably advice that we're giving that's directly and as a negative impact to us from a buying standpoint. But that's the biggest impact is most people drive down their net profit because they're trying to be tax effective.
Yeah.
Right. But that is the biggest multiplier that you're looking at, or that's the measurable multiplier that you're looking for.
And be able to show that easily. We've had a business in the past that we looked at buying. My dad was looking at buying it, and he took it to the bank to try to get a loan on it. And because the owner had basically used it as his, drove that profit down, the bank was like, why do you want to buy this? There's no profit in it. And the owner's like, oh yeah, we have extra expenses in there that you won't have to pay. And it's like, okay, well, we believe you, but the bank doesn't. Like,
and that's what.
And if nothing else, be able to easily show that, like, here's the owner's health insurance, here's the owner's car, like be able to clearly deduct that. Otherwise the bank won't see it. Yes,
clean it. And that's what I was going to say, without a riveting accounting podcast here.
Oh boy.
Ooh, good idea.
Imagine
for next
that.
topic.
Yeah. Get another, that'd be perfect, Tone. But cleaning up the income statement. So lots of owners will have kids, they'll have spouses, they'll have vehicles, they'll have things that are not they're tax efficient ways of being self-employed, but those are the things that are going to make your financial statements mucky. And having them clean and clear and obvious, at least for that period of time leading up to sale, maybe even if it's just a year, that's fine. But these are the things to talk to your accountant with. Go to an external accountant just to make it clear, because banks, and if there is a banker listening, which there won't be because the poor people that listen aren't bankers, but I haven't met a banker yet who knows anything. I should leave it at that, but knows anything about financial statements. And so once it gets complicated, they are,
you need to meet better bankers.
That's a shot to all of the 4 people that are, but if it's complicated, your value just goes down.
Yeah. Yep.
So clean it up out there, and bankers be better.
So what do you guys think private equity is going to look like in our industry 10 years from now? What does the future look like? What are your predictions?
I think that it is going to be a huge benefit for anybody entering into the market or ownership within the next 10 years, because I think it's going to create these massive roll-ups and massive platforms that are going to be so complex that it'll be easy for somebody to re-enter the market and make massive disruption because they can do it better, faster, more efficient.
So you think it'll create a lot of opportunity?
Oh yeah.
I'm going to put all of my weight on AI technology that's happening right now. I think AI technology is going to hugely impact the service industry in general and make service companies much more profitable. And once we hit that, I'm going to call it a critical tipping point, that's when we're going to see private equity really take some notice here. I think right now, it just doesn't, there's a lot more low-hanging fruit. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think once AI comes in and effectively reduces our overhead, the administration, the clunkiness of the systems. The biggest thing impacting our industry that is limiting profitability and therefore saleability, not a word, is the technology involved. And I think with AI, its ability to unify all of the different technologies and database management and all that stuff is going to be a huge impact, therefore reducing administration, which will drive up profitability, which will now attract, instead of being a 11% EBITDA as a percentage of revenue company, we'll probably start seeing 17, 18%, in which case there's a lot more appetite.
Do you think smaller companies, though, will be able to take advantage of that? I actually think that people with the private equity is going to have a leg up on that because they're going to have the money to invest in AI and utilize it.
Well, I think private equity won't look at those. I think private equity will look at guys like us that
have already embraced it.
Already embraced it, but we will do the acquisitions. They'll give us the money. We will be the targets to do the acquisitions using their money to roll everything up. And they'll use the money to create a platform that we can use to scale.
Yeah. I think the fact that the locksmith industry is so A, specialized with knowledge, and B, fragmented from a company size standpoint is going to make it very hard for, I think Chad's point is very accurate.
98% of locksmith companies are of no interest to private equity.
Right.
As it stands right now.
Correct.
They are of interest to us.
Right.
But I don't think PE's there yet.
Yeah, I think that there is a real big play for developing a platform, but I don't know what the involvement of private equity is in that, because I think it is going to require some industry insights to be able to do it effectively.
And that's where I believe the technology, if an AI company, and I can't help but give a plug to my guys at McKinsey, but they're an AI company that is focused on our industry's technology. And they've really opened my eyes to where this is all going to go. And it simplifies building a platform, which would then, exactly what I'm saying, which would then increase profitability, which then makes acquisition a lot more appetizing. Like think of a future where you could walk in to an acquisition target and an AI agent could take all their database information and just seamlessly integrate it into your company.
Right.
Now, like it just makes the value astronomically higher. Yeah. Chad, are you going to bring us home here, or Tone? Do you have any brilliant thoughts? What are some takeaways?
Ooh.
Sorry to wake you. Chad, do you have any takeaways? We'll come back to Tone.
Yeah, that's good.
Over two. Lars, do you have any takeaways?
It's hard to have a takeaway. I guess it's hard for me to have a takeaway on this because this is a conversation that we've obviously had so many times, and this was just kind of an airing of that conversation that we've already repeated.
My biggest takeaway is actually that there might be some value in actually talking to some of these companies, not because I want to sell, but to learn. Like I can tell that you guys have more knowledge on this than I do because you've actually talked to them.
To understand it.
I have not talked to them because I'm like, I don't want to sell this business, so why would I talk to them? But there is value in there as someone who is looking to acquire to understand how they're thinking. And Chad, you've mentioned that before. I just didn't listen to you like usual. And
too risky.
I think actually that's my takeaway is talking to them, understanding them. Sure.
I got that. Yeah. Tony's takeaway is listen to Chad.
My takeaway is that that would in some cases that would benefit me. In others it would not. But yes, talk to them because there's two benefits. One, you learn what they're thinking about. If you want to acquire businesses, you learn how they think. Two, you never know, they may run into businesses that they don't want to buy that are good value for you. So it is valuable to talk to them, learn from them, because they all think differently, and getting understanding of how they think can only benefit you down the road, even if you don't want to sell. And that's my takeaway.
And that is the way that I have a conversation with them. I say, I am not interested in selling, but I am going to ask you a lot of questions because I'm interested in the process, and I am also in acquisition mode. So you can tell me. I hit them straight up.
Well, why do you think they entertain you on that? Why do they waste their time on you?
Who wouldn't want to chat with me on the phone for an hour?
Hey, there's a good podcast.
There's a line of people there.
I could speak for 25 minutes about people that don't want to talk to Chad.
Yes. What was your takeaway, Lars?
Well, one, you both admitted that I was right. about things this episode.
That would be the one thing that you would glean from that. Yes,
I hope
that is
AI
on brand
editor,
right there.
AI editor, if you're listening, hear me. Make that the soundbite, both of them, and that's what I would like to promote on our socials. Is Lars was right. I agree with him. That would be great.
That clip will be erased immediately. Eves has already erased that, actually.
Ever so polite. It's interesting to hear Chad's take wasn't even highlighted. 100% is what private equity is looking at, and I've never actually heard that. I've never had that from any of the people I've talked to, but it makes me realize, I don't know if that's a Canadian American thing or if that's the size that we're looking at. But I've been always under the impression that they're looking for an investment. It's more of an investment vehicle to scale it up, to increase the multiplier, and then sell their chunk somewhere else. And that's interesting, because now I have more ammo for the conversations I have. What is their ideal? What are they looking at?
Cool.
Chad, land this plane, brother.
Well, Tony's going to give us the topic that we're going to be talking about next, because he's been hiding that from us for the past.
Next episode.
Drum roll, please.
Should I be a security specialist or a security generalist? Pros and cons based on products, market segments, brand mix.
Security specialist.
Do you want to be the jack of all trades?
Should I specialize in access control, or should I generalize and do a large amount of security offering? Should I specialize on a product like Brevo, or should I do all access control platforms? Talking about the pros and cons of specialization versus, building a specialized platform like our friend Alan has done versus being a generalist and focusing on something like, I'm going to help the customer with whatever product they have.
The machine.
So, yeah.
Look at you, Tony. 32 episodes in, and we got a good topic. Congratulations.
Wow. I'm honored. I've actually
Make a
gotten
note,
your approval
this
for
is
once.
one in a row.
Yes.
We're on a roll. Call it a streak.
Chad, where can the people find us? Oh, I did want to mention, I had a buddy shout out today that he sent me a message, and he's like, I'm listening to your March 20th episode, and it was my buddy Cam. I guess he was driving to work, and he's like, how long did it take these guys to figure out your dry, sarcastic, snide sense of humor?
About 6 minutes, but that was 8 years ago. So
yeah, and I was thinking, well, first of all, rude. Second of all, thanks for listening. That's number 5. So but he also said I was great. You guys were average. So he was on Brad. That's what we'd like to wrap on. Chad, if we wanted to expand to 6 listeners, where would they find us, do you think?
Oh, I was laughing at the introduction that we had to one of our latest episodes where you said the star of the show always introduces himself last. Thank you very much for tuning in today. You can subscribe on all the major platforms. If you are listening to this as a podcast, you also can find out more information about us, as well as blog posts and links to our YouTube channel on our website, unlockedpodcast.com. Great landing zone
and gentlemen.
Yes, all of that. And if you go back a couple of episodes, I don't know what number it is, you can listen to our fantastic theme song that was listener submitted.
That you lost in the internet somewhere here. Chad, get it together, man.
One day we're going to figure out how to use this studio in here with audio. So
hey, do you want to quickly flip to your other behind the scenes camera? Because I know you're pumped about it.
Boom.
Ooh, there it is.
Behind the scenes. Look at that.
That is amazing.
Look at that monitor.
Monitors. All right. Thank you guys for joining us today. We're coming back next week with a conversation around security specialist or security generalist. Hold your breath for that. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time on the Unlocked Podcast.